Welcome back to Open BXRx. COVID-19 has brought forth the many disadvantages low-income communities face. Our next guest wrote an op-ed on what is referred to as the digital divide and how it impacts communities of color. What is the digital divide and how did we get here? Joining us now is Stan Altman, professor and president of the nonprofit organization Science and Arts Engagement New York. Thank you for joining us, Stan.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
The first thing we want to start with is, of course, learning about Science and Arts Engagement New York. Can you just tell us about that?
Sure. In 2013, a colleague of mine at the Graduate Center heard about a gallery that had been opened by Trinity College in Dublin called the Science Gallery. And the idea was to attract young people into careers in the STEM fields. The Irish government wanted to diversify their economy. And we thought that this was a wonderful idea and venue for trying to attract young Black and Latinx students into the STEM and tech fields because they're so underrepresented in areas that are growing with really well-paying jobs. And we felt that this was an opportunity. And so both of us being alumni of City College, engaged City College to begin to look at opening up such a gallery in Harlem. And when the budget crisis hit City University in about 2014-15, we had started the process, decided we couldn't let it stop because the college was now facing budget issues. So we formed a separate nonprofit, Science and Arts Engagement in New York, and have been working to open this gallery ever since. We have subsequently reconnected with City College. So I've been spending the last year up at the college working on the gallery, for which we've done two exhibitions, one around basketball and one around the science of music, jazz, and hip hop.
Oh, it sounds wonderful. I'm going to have to visit my alma mater, City College.
Aha, wonderful.
And now can we lead into, Stan, the digital divide? What does that mean for those who are not familiar with the term?
Well, the digital divide means that the facilities that are now being provided through the internet, both in terms of commerce, in terms of jobs, in terms of educational opportunities, are really accessible to people who have the means and resources to both buy the equipment, computers and tablets, as well as pay for subscription services to get access to the internet. If you're in a low-income community or if you're working and earning less than $30,000 a year, it's kind of hard to figure out how you're going to pay $60 a month for an internet subscription. And so what's happened is that there's an unequal distribution of who has access to the internet and all of the digital technology that's now driving our society. And the divide almost, it's not perfect, but almost divides between urban low-income communities and even rural communities around the country, and those who are in more privileged to have access to resources. And this has become pretty much to the forefront through the coronavirus because everything is moved online. And if I don't have access to online, if I don't have a tablet or a computer, even if I have access to the internet, or if I'm at home with the rest of my family, it makes it very hard for me to get an education. Whereas if I had my own room, I had access to high-speed internet, I have a computer, I have friends who also are on networks so I can talk to. Mm-hmm. It's not an equal, equitable situation.
Right. And like you said, Stan, the COVID-19 pandemic has kind of brought this inequity to the forefront when it comes to both students and the education system, as well as older people. Seniors, for instance, in NYCHA, don't have access to tech, and they've been getting, these updates and all these resources being sent out by the housing authority, but have no access to learn about these things.
Well, that's exactly right. In fact, from my perspective, we're not going to go back to an era in which the internet wasn't an integral part of our life. The change that's been brought about by the coronavirus has now put in play a whole other series of things that now it's going to depend on the internet. I think we're going to see more online education than we've done before. Telemedicine is going to become an important component of the way in which healthcare gets provided. The access to timely, reliable, truthful information, which is accessible over the internet. I remember when Hurricane Sandy happened. A friend of mine was commissioner of the Department of the Aging. At some point, they didn't know where seniors were. So it was impossible to rescue seniors from high-rise apartments because they had no idea that they were there.
Wow.
And so I think if we don't provide places like NYCHA and people who live there access to this internet, and if we don't provide access to the internet for people who live in low-income communities, we're going to make it impossible to access basic services that people are going to need to live and work in this 21st century. And I think that's one of the reasons why, and part of what I've been writing is saying that we really need to finish the information highway. Just like in the 50s, we built a highway across the entire United States. Or later on, when they built the electrification of rural communities so everybody would have access to electricity. There's no reason that everybody can't have access to affordable internet services in this day and age.
Okay. And now, Stan, just bringing up 5G and the 5G towers that we keep hearing about, they're a big topic today. First, what is 5G? And second, will the implementation of this technology worsen the digital divide or help it?
Well, I think it's going to worsen it for the following reasons. What has progressed with all of these various versions from 1G to 2G to 4G, increasingly it's provided access to internet services. The 5G component is an outgrowth of the fact that what we would now want to be able to do are things like driverless cars. We want to be able to do all sorts of sophisticated operations which require very fast response times. And a 4G network, it takes much longer to download information. So if I'm have a driverless car and it needs to make a split-second decision, it can't wait for a delay in getting information back from where it stores all this knowledge. The 5Gs are very fast. They do very quick downloads. They have much greater capacity to handle activity on the internet. One of the things we're experiencing today with so much use on the internet for education, for just basic communication between people who can't visit each other, is that at times you find internet speeds really slow down. 5G networks are meant to be significantly faster, and they're able to handle maybe 1,000 times more users than current 4G networks. But it also means that if you need equipment that interfaces with 5G internet service. So if I have a cell phone and it's a 3G or a 4G, I can currently work on the current network, but it won't work on a 5G network.
Right.
Which means that I either have to spend several $100s to upgrade my equipment, or I'm going to work on slower networks while everybody who can afford it is going to migrate to faster networks. And as you probably know, as soon as that's the marketplace, everybody who has a commercial venture is going to produce products that move towards 5G, which means people who've got slower speeds get left with, less up-to-date and quality products.
Right. So this is what we refer to as the new normal. There's no going back after this.
I don't think so. I think, for one, if you just look at the impact of the shutting down of the economy has produced on terms of state budgets, and the predictions of how long it's going to take the economy to come back in order to allow governments to function, and even for the economy to function as it did before this pandemic, we're talking about several years. I mean, I think and we're not talking about, even when we allow people to begin to go back to work, we're not talking about letting them to go back to concerts and baseball games where there's crowding. So people's lifestyles are going to change. And so, yeah, this isn't the new normal. I think unless there's a real voice that talks to the issue of having to really approach social equity from the point of view of basic services needs to get done. And as long as the federal government is spending trillions of dollars to go into debt, and are providing significant money to large corporations, either through unknown tax breaks or through direct grants and aids, they can come up with the money to build the information highway. They can come up with the money to find a solution that provides affordable cost access to the services everybody needs.
I think it's feasible. Stan, can you also speak about the importance of science and art fields and representation in tech industry as a whole?
Well, absolutely. There are really three things here, I think. One, the way in which work was done in the 20th century was very, very isolated and siloed. It was very much a repetitive task. It assumed that you could predict and produce standard products, right? The 21st century is quite different. It's not a whole mass production anymore. In fact, the internet has allowed startup companies to produce individual items tailored to a person's particular taste. And so the 21st century really requires a whole different set of skills, even just to be able to navigate everyday life. You need to be able to deal with uncertainty, as we're rapidly discovering during the coronavirus. You've got to be able to be and discern information. So you have to be able to be a critical thinker and a problem solver. You have to be able to communicate, because you don't really have the luxury in many cases of being able to just walk and do something. You have to communicate through now all sorts of technology. And you need to be technologically literate, even if you're not a technologist. You need to be able to understand how to use it. Mm-hmm. And I think what the issue we now face is that we're not really preparing people, and government's not really preparing itself to deal with these changes that are taking place in this whole digital age. And I think places like City College, which is one of the reasons that we decided to work in Harlem, and clearly my heart is in the South Bronx, so you understand why just crossing over the bridge into my old neighborhood is important for me. I think the college has a whole history going back to its original founding in 1847, dealing with trying to find ways to bring people who, in a sense, would have been excluded from career opportunities and would have been excluded from a higher education because they couldn't afford it, to find ways to help with upward mobility, to find ways to provide access to the economy. And I think unless we begin to focus on really re-educating how we do the schools in low-income communities and the resources they have, how we encourage young people to get excited about things that they can do. One of the things that strikes me doing work across the City University, I run a competition involving IBM Watson AI, is that the creativity of young people, and all you really need to do is encourage them that they can do it. Yeah. There's this sense, I can't do it, I can't try. Having grown up on the streets of the South Bronx, I understand that quite well. I was fortunate to be able to go to Stuyvesant and then go to City College and find out that, wow, I really can do some of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I think unless we do things like that, we're going to take a whole generation of young people and exclude them from the job market at exactly the time when the tech sector is beginning to create all these jobs. And then there are all these other jobs that are not technical that support the tech sector. People who have psychology backgrounds, who are communication majors, who are even philosophy majors, because you have to understand the human factors part of using this technology. And so our concern at City College, and my colleagues and our concern why we want to do the Harlem Gallery of Science, is to show that there are ways that we can invest in our young people to get them excited and to convince them that there are careers that they can really take on and do, and then earn a decent living.
Thank you. Thank you, Stan, for joining us and for providing this wealth of knowledge. And we're here at BronxNet. We're here to support the Harlem Gallery of Science. Once all this is over, hopefully sooner than later, we will be there to support as best we can.
Well, we would love to have you, and I'd love to do this again. And thank you very much for inviting me.
It's been wonderful. Folks, you can visit scienceartsengagementny.org to learn more about Stan's nonprofit organization, highlighting the importance of STEAM careers in communities of color. Open BXRx. We'll be right back.